All right. It says we are now live. Welcome, everybody, to another WineShark Wednesday. It is I, your host, the WineShark. Hope you're doing well. Another week gone by. It seems to be March just flying by with all things that are coming up in April. I've been planning for the Scarborough Renaissance Festival, so I've been doing wine list planning, and I took some continuing education and did an industry event with Sauvignon Blanc with 6 different Sauvignon Blancs from Chile called Discovering the Six Faces of Sauvignon Blanc. It was an excellent online meeting, and I also got to try out the product from a company called Master the World, which is the delivery service. They do packaging and delivery of wines specifically for things like blind wine tasting or just demonstration stuff like this. So I got a neat little kit with 6 different mini bottles. I think they're 175 mils, and they're wrapped in such a way that they're all homogeneous bottles. The label is custom printed, and then it has a wrap over it, so it just says wine number 1, wine number 2, wine number 3, and then you crack that seal, and you can open it up and see what the wine was. So if you're doing a blind tasting, it's a great way to learn. In fact, the Guild of Sommeliers here in America is using this same tool for their blind wine tasting skill set. So if you're interested in blinds, something very cool to check out. Of course, if you are interested in blinds, get together with a team of folks who know what they're doing, or a great educator to teach you how to do the deductive method of tasting, so that you can actually learn from it, not just play fun party games with guessing your wine. So did that, and it was an excellent experience. The winemakers, in this case, we weren't blind tasting, but the winemakers were individually describing their different regional variations on Sauvignon Blanc from Chile, and really had an amazing experience. It was just eye-opening to have 6 different wines of the same grape varietal that had such a nice segmentation and difference. It truly was special to taste. Everything from the stuff in Casablanca versus in Aconcagua Valley versus Tierra del Sur, and really see how these different regions and the different winemakers, of course, bring style to their wines. So you'll be seeing some benefits of that. I'll be passing on some of that knowledge and working on a deep dive into Chilean Sauvignon Blanc once I get some access to some of these wines, and look for that over on Patreon. So yeah, today, however, we're going to talk about that. Actually, that spurred me for the topic of the day, which is the fact that we're going to talk about Methoxypyrazines. Methoxypyrazines are very present in Sauvignon Blanc, so therefore I got onto the chemistry of things and decided, hey, we need to review that topic and talk a little bit about why it's cool. So, wine chemistry. Like I said, this is an intermediate level kind of talk. If you know you like Sauvignon Blanc, or even if you know you like Bordeaux wine blends, anything, or Bordeaux wine grapes for that matter, anything from Sauvignon Blanc to Cabernet Franc to their child wine, child grape, the Cabernet Sauvignon, to Merlot, all these wines have something in common, and it's a chemical group of compounds called methoxypyrazines. So what are they? According to the AWRI, the Australian Wine Research Institute, they're a group of compounds found in both grapes and wine, which are responsible for the very characteristic, quote, green, herbaceous, or vegetative aromas of Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and some other Bordeaux variety wines. So when we talk about these are aroma compounds. Okay, they give us impressions that are often described. There are several subgroups. We're going to talk a little bit about them as we go on, but the common descriptors that we get here are bell pepper, gooseberry or boxwood in the case of Sauvignon Blancs, grassy or herbal. So generally speaking, mostly green stuff. There's a couple exceptions, but really green is the color you'll be thinking of when you think about smelling these aroma compounds. And they can be an excellent identification marker for what grapes lie within a wine if you are doing blind wine tasting. So why, one might ask, are these important? Well, for one, again, AWRI talks about the concentration of this. The article I read, and that was both scientific, and then I read some other I was kind of brushing up on some of my other professional and just peer-to-peer type sources, good wine books, etc. But in looking at the research portion of it, looking at the science part, the compounds that are very potent and have very low, what we call sensory thresholds, meaning very small amounts are easily detectable by your nose. They have a sensory threshold, again, according to AWRI, of about 1 to 2 nanograms per liter. Okay, that's very, very small. To give you an example of how much is in your wine, the wine ranges for isobutyl methoxypyrazines, or IBMP. They're typically present somewhere between 5 to 30 nanograms per liter, and we can detect just 1 to 2. So obviously they're very potent. They have a very strong or distinctive ability to detect them in your wine and in grapes. Now, white wines tend to be on the lower side of the scale. Red wines tend to be on the higher side of the scale for these concentrations. And of course, they can vary based on things like exposure to the sun, how ripe the grapes are when they're harvested, vine health, etc. So a lot of the natural things that affect how grapes come out can vary these numbers. By the way, the cool part that in AWRI was they do testing for this professionally. Like, you can send them samples of your product and have them do a very technical analysis with their trained staff / awesome equipment and give you readings to help you dial in to build the wine that you're trying to build, to make sure that you're not going too far. Because you see, they're potent, and that's the important part, but think about the aroma indicators like this, like salt or spices in your food, right? Too much can be basically a distraction or ruin things. So too much MMP or IDMPs ID and BMPs can cause your wine to become flawed. Basically, it's too potent in that section, and the wine becomes unbalanced. So getting the exact right amount and having that proper ripeness level to get things to where you want it to be and turning into an amazing wine is just like that perfect amount of salt or the perfect amount of pepper or garlic or whatever the season or spice you can think of. It works exactly like that in your wine, where you gotta have just the right amount. What I find fascinating, of course, is that the chemicals like this that are indicative of the grape, that are a positive, can also be a negative. There's that you want this in there, but you just want the right amount, and I think that's whereas normally flaws in things like food, beer, wine, spirits, etc. What we think about them is they think about them as external sources. For instance, cork taint and trichloroanisole, coming from our little corks, that's an external thing. That's not natural to the wine. It's always a bad thing, and so this is one of those cases where preference matters, wine style making matters, and whether it's a flaw or not is oftentimes a subjective note. Although I would say when you really go off the deep end, it's pretty obvious. So anyway, what is it that you're looking for in your wine? So the thing to think about here, just to become familiar with these chemicals, there's 2 broad styles, and just to avoid the overly sciencey, there are the IBMP and IPMP, okay? So that is for 3-isobutyl 2-methoxypyrazine, that's IB, and then IP is 2-isopropyl, okay? So these are basically just different versions of these compounds chemically rendered. Now, IBMP, the B one, is the more prevalent version. Usually accounts for like 70-80% of the MPs that are in your wine. And these are the ones that give us flavors like bell pepper, vegetal, kind of dark, think vegetative nature rather than green and bright. So the examples are bell pepper, vegetation, asparagus, canned green beans, can also get a mushroom or earthy or musty flavor to it. Now, the more you go up that scale, the more you're going to risk a flawed version of that wine. So for instance, like green beans and asparagus is not really usually considered a positive note. It means your MPs are out of balance. Okay. Now the IPMP, the isopropyl version, isobutyl, is found in much, much smaller concentrations. Generally This has much more of the peas and green beans are much more kind of mentioned here, but as well as flavors like dead leaves or peanuts, and again, musty or earthy natures. So this is one where you need it in very small amounts to get what you want done, right? So now you're not going to see anything like this on a wine label. This isn't something that we're going to be looking at in the grocery store or even on a wine tech sheet. You're not going to see this type of thing. What you're trying to learn here is how to recognize these in a wine and decide for yourself what levels you like and enjoy, what makes a wine in that particular herbaceous category that you find delightful, or if it's something that you don't like, how to identify and avoid it. Additionally, if you're going to get into doing blind wine tasting and you're trying to identify a wine without knowing what its label is, these characteristic aromas are going to give away some of those Bordeaux varietals. It's going to help narrow down your choices by saying, aha, I smell this key indicator and it's most prevalent in these things. Combined with other factors about those wines, you can draw conclusions about what the wine might be. So you can think about it from both the technical level, you can think about it from a personal, subjective, and just taste enjoyment level. But either way, learning about this, some basic chemistry on this and knowing what gives us those smells and be able to associate them is a great step on your intermediate level wine journey. So I hope that helps with some of your education. If you guys have questions about it, don't hesitate to drop me a line in the comments or send me various forms of communication. You guys know all the usual social methods. So now let's get on to our halfway point of the show, wine quiz. This comes from our Wine Wars game here, and we've been doing this just because it's a fun thing because, well, I like to quiz myself. More importantly, it's fun, extra education, and sometimes I get things wrong, just like the rest of us. You know, none of us are perfect, but also that sometimes I even find that, I think even the game makes some mistakes. So I like to butt heads with the cards. So there are 5 categories, which cover vine to vino, basically turning grape into wine. We've got things about the graposphere, which is about the grapes themselves and their geography, the wines that come from them. Then there's the wine cellar, which is about storing, sorting, and tasting wine. Then wine and food, a personal favorite of mine, of course. And cork culture. This is much more of the wine people, businesses, arts, and sciences, it says. So think about that as much more of the social side of things. So let's go through these one at a time here. The first one is, which bright red fruit early maturing wine is typically made using whole grape bunches and carbonic maceration? Multiple choice question, is it Beaujolais, Merlot, or Pinot Noir? All right, this one, by the way, the key clues here are the things to look for are the whole cluster press and carbonic maceration. There's a wine that's very famous for this. That is the Beaujolais Nouveau. Beaujolais, which is, by the way, I don't like to find that they said these wines that they say. It's actually, they mentioned 2 grapes in one region. But Beaujolais is a region, not a grape. Beaujolais is Gamay, which is more commonly called that. So the Gamay grape from the Beaujolais region, they make carbonic maceration. Yeah, I'm 100% certain of that. Okay, what previously little-known red grape variety has been Argentina's star in recent years? Most of you guys should know this. We've done several shows, and in fact, a recent deep dive on the comparison between this grape in Argentina and this grape with its old French-style heritage. That grape would be Malbec. Yes. Once a blending grape from Bordeaux in 1957, they had a very bad freeze that killed off a lot of their Malbec grapes, and it fell out of favor. It's still grown around the area of Cahors in France, and very popular Argentinian from the Mendoza region. About 75% of their wine production lives in Mendoza, and 85% of that is in the wonderful world of Malbec. So try some today and get the deep dive over on my Patreon. All right, true or false? Sherry-like smells in unfortified wines may indicate a faulty wine due to oxidization. I believe that is true. Yes, indeed it is. Yes, so oxidization, remember the action of oxygen on your wine is a key thing in changing flavors. I can't say how much. It is important to learn what wine flaws are versus wine flavors, and that way you can identify when something is broken. Oh, got a cover here. Mark says, once had a cab once that tasted like asparagus, and now I know why. Yes, indeed, Mark. you've definitely got that. And especially if it tasted too much like asparagus, in other words, if it was unpleasant, probably meant it was a little out of balance in its methoxypyrazines. By the by, those are things that I think will also, they can help age out. So maybe if the wine was young, it might have been that, or it could have just been a wine flaw. All right, next question. Which is the most classic wine pairing with foie gras? Is it Pinot Gris, Champagne, or Sauterne? Well, I don't spend enough time eating foie gras, so I'm going to make a pretty foodie stab in the dark here. I'm going to say it can't be something sweet like Sauterne. Pinot Gris sounds too sharp. I'm going to bet foie gras and bubbly Champagne. Was incorrect. That would be Sauterne. Not as famous as the other two wines pair well, too. So apparently all three of these are perfectly good options, but Sauterne. So, a sweet, rich, creamy thing. That'd be interesting to try. So, last but not least, so we're 3-1 here. The last one is, which cellar method does Chilean winemaker Ariel Montes used to improve his maturing wines? By the way, I didn't meet this guy at my Chile visit, so I don't know Ariel Montes. But used to improve his maturing wines. Is it barrel rotation at full moon or piped in Gregorian chants? Okay, that's some exoticness right there. I would probably say my answer is going to be barrel rotation at full moon. Probably linked to biodynamic practices from George Steiner. I think his first name is George. I know his last name is Steiner. But you never know. Piped in Gregorian chants, maybe singing to your Chilean wine makes it better matured. Let's find out. Apparently, it's piped in Gregorian chants for the effect of a gentle vibration. Oh, so he's sonically aging his wine with a little bit of Domineus Requie. Well, rock on. So, barrel rotation at the full moon, I would have definitely bought as biodynamicism at work, but he sings to his wine. Well, get on it, Aurelio. You do you. I'm going to have to check the efficacy of that one. I think it'd be a very interesting to hear, too. Like, is it just the same thing? Do the wines get tired of hearing the same channel all the time? Do they have some options? I mean, Gregorian monks come and sing themselves? I don't know. All right. Fair enough. Well, then we're going to move on from our wine quiz to our grocery store grab. So the grocery store grab, the premise here is to get the best value per dollar for wines found at non-big box and non-specialty retailers. If you don't have the option of shopping at one of those places, or if you, for convenience sake, simply shop at the grocery store, you could be in a part of the shopping experience where you don't have a lot of assistance. Rarely does a wine section in a grocery store have a trained wine expert to help you make your choices. So we work on label-focused wine choosing. We not only look for how to read labels that you're going to see in this very busy, very advanced market, but also we look towards rewarding wines that tell us good information on their labels. So today's selection is the Z. Alexander Brown. Shift over here to the Uncaged proprietary red blend. This is the 2019 version from California. I caught my attention because it's got a hoot hoot owl on it. So that is definitely a superb owl, and that's what caught my attention. But of course, it's not just about grabbing attention. We could buy any wine if that was the case. What I look back here is looking at the label. The label it performs pretty well by what we're looking for. So what we're looking for on our label, we want to know who's making the wine. Our answer already is Z. Alexander Brown. What's in it? What grapes are in it? We're trying to see if they get there. And then, of course, where the grapes are from. In this case, it's from California, as labeled on the front. So that means it's a California-wide. It means they're probably pulling grapes from multiple American viticultural areas. Okay, so it's not only blended by grape, it's very likely blended by region. On the back of the label here, though, it repeats its information from the front, the Uncaged. And then it says, we usually they're going to have their marketing speak. We've got, the owl is the guardian of the vine, and myths say it is present when the spirit is set free. Our winemaking style is, and this is all capital letters, Uncaged, and offers big, bold flavors that finish with uncommon finesse. Okay, so there's their pat themselves on the I love me statement. But dark garnet in the glass, dense layers of jammy fruit, black cherry, and toasted oak leave a lasting impression, leading to a robust yet smooth finish. With each vintage, there is pure connection to the land that we are proud to share every time a bottle is opened. So that's kind of I would grade that as a C plus B minus effort on the descriptors. They're well in the range of giving us lots of them, but they're not particularly detailed. Deep garnet in the glass, that's good. In fact, I would also, just by looking at the wine here, that is very accurate. It is trending that way. Dense layers of jammy fruit, okay? And they go on to at least say black cherry, but that's all. I could use a few more descriptors of what jammy fruits we're talking about. And toasted oak, well, that just says that they're using oak in their program and leaves us a little short of possible some other descriptors that might help us decide whether to pick up this wine or not. The one sin that they're committing here, and it's the big one on my list, while it is their, quote, proprietary red blend, I want to know what you're blending in my wine. I've been harping on this for years now, and most of you who have been on my shows know it, but the fact is, I need to know what the hell the grapes are in your glass so that I know whether if I like it, so that I can go on and repeat it, or if I don't like it, I can stay away from it. So this is very likely a kitchen sink level wine with blah, 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 and blah. Now, picking out wines from this in blends is a difficult skill, one that I have not yet mastered. But based on that coloration, from that garnet color in the deep towards purple range, I'm going to bet this is more in the Petit Syrah, Petit Verdot, Zinfandel, darker end of the spectrum at its base. On the nose, I'm getting a big chunk of that black cherry, dark blackberry, kind of maybe not quite red fruit raspberry, grenadine, pomegranate, maybe a little hint of mocha in there. So it's not, again, it doesn't scream, by the way, it doesn't hit any of our pyrazine notes. So I'm thinking that this is not a Cabernet driven or a Merlot driven wine. I mean, it's most assuredly not Cabernet Franc driven. But that deep dark color screams, on the Grenache slash I wouldn't even say Malbec, but the Grenache, Zinfandel, Petit Syrah line, especially when we're talking about deep dark flavors, Petit Syrah and Petit Verdot are very easy. Although it makes me wonder, because those are less common grapes, whether they were reaching for that or whether they're just bulking it out with those to get that coloration. All right, on the palate. Oh, surprisingly not a big chewy. Big fruit right across the middle. It's got some actual acid punch left going on. Makes the mouth water a little bit. They're not hammering it with oak. So pretty restrained as far as those are concerned. By the way, the price point on this one, I believe, was $15 after the usual club discounts. This is playing in that $15 range. And very much, as we've talked about before, hitting the very popular red blend category. But yeah, brighter fruit up front than I was expecting, that then leans into more of that currant cassis blackberry, little hint of that vanilla from the oak that's left over there. Although it's not a ton, it doesn't have a big tannic structure, so they've kept that in check. So, I mean, they've managed to keep that fruit very much front and center without over oaking it. Really good for this, broadly speaking, style. Even though we don't know what style they're looking for because we don't know what grapes they are. So we always ask ourselves 3 questions when we talk about the wines here, rather than a true clinical analysis or anything here. Is it well executed? I would say, yeah, the wine is well made. I think they might be cutting some corners with their oak program because it doesn't have a ton of that oak structure in there. But for a red blend like this, I don't know that I expect it. So is it well executed? Yeah. Is it on style? Hard to say. And I keep coming back to this answer the more I taste red blends from this new California regime. California is kind of carving out its niche on this red blend world. And it's not Bordeaux style. It's not the Cabernet driven or Merlot driven style that is known in Northern California as Meritage. This is a whole new thing. They're very much aiming at the newer wine drinker. They're making wines that are jammy, fruit present, and very accessible. So that being said, I don't know if that's a style yet. So it's a tough call. Is it worth the price tag? I'd say yeah. Actually, for the price point here, this isn't bad. The only thing that they're doing in the sin in my book is that they are assuming that because their target market is new to wine drinkers, that they don't have to speak to them as if they are wine drinkers. Meaning they're not offering good information to help you get to be a better wine drinker. They're not telling you what grapes are in here, and I think that's clearly been a label where they dumb down the label the lower the price point gets, because they figure, well, if you're just buying $10 wine, then you just don't give a damn, which is unfortunate. Many people begin their wine journeys there, and there's no harm in offering. Information is free. It doesn't cost you. They're not paying by the letter to put ink on their damn label. So suck it up. Act like you're going to create wine drinkers for a lifetime, rather than just try and sell them a $10 to $15 bottle of wine. So, anyway, Z. Alexander Brown, Uncaged. The little owlet on there. Fun little wine. Give it a go. I found it at my local Tom Thumb. This was where I shopped this week. So give it a go. And certainly, by the way, they said I was wondering whether we were going to get any examples of our MPs, our Methoxypyrazines in this. The answer is no. Looks like they're going to be a little bit out of it. But that being said, a perfectly drinkable red blend. I'm going to enjoy the rest of the evening with this. I've got to get on to making some content for my Patreon folks. I am so behind. I have been kind of trapped on getting some of these deep dives done. But I've got a show for Vermentino coming. I've got a show for Muscat Blanc, or Melon de Bourgogne, if you prefer. And we are also going to be doing a recipe made for a stuffed pork loin with an apple Riesling sauce, and show you how to make that and how to pair it with its own beautiful Riesling. So look for those in your Patreon box. If you're interested, come over and check us out on Patreon. You can get all kinds of extra deep dive support, recipes, food tips, the kinds of things that you work in your day-to-day wine life. If you like what we're doing, hit that like button and subscribe. Share with a wine-loving friend. And if you really like what we're doing, like I said, check us out over on Patreon and, of course, on Instagram as well. So, looking forward to our upcoming shows. We'll see you guys the next time. But until next time, I've been your Wine Shark. Cheers. That's nice.